What happens after the last breath? What really happens after the final breath? Does the ego dissolve into nothingness, or does the soul pass through gates that the human mind cannot fathom? This question has long haunted humanity, and it also marks the beginning of a journey into the deepest mysteries of existence. In this video, we step into an ancient doorway of spiritual knowledge, Bardo Thodol, also known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Imagine holding a map, not one that leads through geography, but a spiritual map that guides you through the most mysterious and ambiguous moments of life and death. That is the role of the Bardo Thodol. It is not merely a manual for the dying. Rather, it is a sacred compass designed to guide human consciousness through the intermediate state between death and rebirth, known as the Bardo. This text was created by Padmasambhava, a legendary figure in Tibetan Buddhism, revered as Guru Rinpoche, precious master. Born in India in the 8th century, Padmasambhava was far more than an ordinary monk. He was a great yogi, a master of esoteric practices, and is regarded as the one who brought Buddhism to Tibet, ushering in a new spiritual era for the land. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is not only for those on their deathbed, but also for the living, to help them understand the nature of existence and prepare the mind to receive death not as an end, but as an opportunity for liberation. With boundless compassion, Padmasambhava left behind a sacred legacy to illuminate the spiritual path for the living and to help the dead find light even after departing the world. Padmasambhava, whom Tibetans honor as Guru Rinpoche, meaning precious master, was no ordinary spiritual teacher. He was a legendary figure in Buddhist history, seen as the one who brought Buddhist teachings from India to Tibet in the 8th century, laying the foundation for one of the world's most profound and comprehensive spiritual systems. From a young age, Padmasambhava exhibited extraordinary mystical powers. He was recognized as a Mahasiddha, a term denoting a highly realized being who has attained spiritual enlightenment and developed mystical abilities known as siddhis, considered miraculous by ordinary people. He didn't just understand Buddhist theory, he deeply practiced tantric techniques and meditation, gaining a comprehensive insight into the nature of consciousness and the cosmos. At that time, Tibet was a land teeming with spiritual activity, yet it was largely under the influence of the indigenous Bon religion, a system rooted in shamanic and nature spirit beliefs. This was a diverse, chaotic, and even resistant culture when it came to the spread of external religions. In response, King Trisong Detsen, the Tibetan ruler of the time, invited Padmasambhava to help establish Buddhism as a unifying spiritual force for the nation. Yet this journey was far from easy. When Padmasambhava arrived in Tibet, he faced fierce resistance from the local spirits in the Bon tradition. According to Tibetan lore, the native deities and spirits of Bon rose in opposition to Buddhism's presence. Using his wisdom and spiritual powers, Padmasambhava did not confront them forcefully, but chose the path of transformation, employing tantric magic to subdue these deities and integrate them into the Buddhist cosmology, transforming former enemies into Dharmapalas, protectors of the Dharma. Through this harmonious blending of Buddhist teachings and indigenous beliefs, Padmasambhava created a unique form of Buddhism, what we now know as Tibetan Buddhism. He founded the Sami Monastery, Tibet's first Buddhist temple, marking the official birth of a new monastic community in a spiritual path on the mystical plateau. More than a religious transmission, Padmasambhava's journey was a revelation of wisdom, where human beings could come to understand the nature of consciousness, reality, and the cycle of rebirth, samsara. From this foundation arose Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, an inseparable part of the spiritual legacy he left behind. One of the most important gifts Padmasambhava offered to humanity is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol. This book is not merely a religious text, it is a detailed spiritual map guiding the soul through death, disintegration, and rebirth. In Tibetan Buddhist understanding, death is not the end, but a transitional phase of consciousness, where the mind enters a state known as Bardo, the intermediate state or in-between. According to these teachings, after death, a person does not immediately reincarnate. Instead, they journey through an intermediate phase lasting around 49 days, a space between death and rebirth. This is a profoundly critical and fragile period when the soul is no longer tied to the physical body, but still carries all the habits, emotions, and karmic imprints from the previous life. In the initial days after death, the soul encounters the pure light of being, known as the brilliant white light of the ultimate reality. This light represents the true nature of the mind, Buddha nature. If the person had practiced meditation and realized the pure, empty essence of their mind, they could merge with that light and achieve liberation, escaping the cycle of rebirth. But for most, the light is too intense and unfamiliar. They recoil in fear and turn away. This avoidance propels the soul into further phases of the Bardo, where it begins to perceive visions, sounds, and phenomena created by its own karma and subconscious mind. Here, terrifying or seductive images arise, projections from the depths of the unconscious. These are expressions of the five spiritual elements, earth, water, fire, air, space, as well as wrathful and peaceful deities. If one fails to recognize the illusory nature of these visions, the soul becomes entangled in desires, aversions, and ignorance, leading to uncontrolled rebirth, drawn into a womb and beginning another life cycle, repeating old sufferings. Therefore, Bardo Thodol is not just a manual for the dead, it is also a guide for the living, for those who wish to understand the nature of the mind, of reality, and prepare for death as a journey of awakening. It is a reminder that living mindfully is the surest preparation for a peaceful death. If we learn to understand our minds while alive, then in death, we will no longer be afraid, and may even transcend the cycle of samsara with grace and serenity. After the soul passes through the stages of Bardo, experiencing the pure light and then the karmic projections, the journey is still not over. A crucial phase begins, the preparation for rebirth. Here, all choices, thoughts, and deepest desires from the previous life begin to guide the soul toward a new physical form. According to Tibetan Buddhism, rebirth is not a random process. It is entirely orchestrated by karma, the accumulated actions, thoughts, and emotions of countless past lives. Every action leaves an imprint on consciousness. When the body dissolves, these imprints remain intact. They are like a spiritual DNA that shapes the next incarnation. While drifting through the Bardo, the soul starts to be attracted to sexual imagery, a symbolic sign of a couple in union, the future parents. This is a striking teaching of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The rebirth process begins with desire, attachment to pleasure, the body, and material life. From this subtle impulse, the soul is unknowingly drawn into the womb. If the soul's karma is positive and its mind is light and awakened, it may be reborn in higher realms filled with light, understanding, and bliss. But if the mind is still full of anger, craving, and delusion, rebirth will occur in lower realms, possibly as a human in unfortunate conditions, or worse, as an animal, a hungry ghost, or in a hell realm. That is why Tibetan teachings always emphasize, death is not an end, it is a transition. And what determines where you go, or what you become, is not an external judge, but the quality of your inner life while you were alive. The wonder is that even in the final moments of the Bardo phase, just days before rebirth, if the soul realizes the true nature of all phenomena, that everything is mind-created, liberation can still happen instantly. This is the most profound message of Bardo Thodol. Even after death, there remains a chance to awaken. Awakening does not require sainthood. It simply requires awareness, presence in the moment, even if that moment is the final one of a human life. That's why Tibetan masters prepare for death early, not out of fear, but because they know death is also an opportunity for liberation. In the last moments of Bardo, as the soul is about to be drawn back into rebirth by karma and desire, it may seem that everything is already decided. But no, one last chance remains. A door to liberation quietly awaits, offering the soul a glimpse of the true nature of reality and itself. According to Bardo Thodol, even when everything seems out of control, awakening is still possible. The soul might suddenly realize that everything, visions, sounds, emotions, even the illusions of future parents, are merely projections of the mind. Nothing exists independently. There is no heaven out there, no hell awaiting, All is mind, and the mind is always vast, pure, and luminous. In that moment, when the ultimate truth is seen, the soul can attain complete liberation. No need to continue in the cycle. No need for rebirth. No need for another life. Just a deep recognition that all is illusion, all is mind, all is a fleeting play, like clouds passing through the sky. But such realization at death is not easy. Our minds are accustomed to clinging, reacting through karmic habits. If we haven't trained in mindfulness, in observing the mind, in developing inner strength during life, then in death, confusion, fear, and ignorance will overwhelm any clarity. And then we are helplessly swept back into the wheel of samsara. That's why Tibetans spend their whole lives preparing for death, not in fear, but with profound understanding and courage to face the truth. They meditate, reflect on impermanence, and learn to let go, so that when the final moment comes, they enter death not with panic, but with liberation. Death, when seen through the lens of awareness, is no longer a tragedy. It becomes a miraculous opportunity to awaken. And no matter where you are in life, young or old, preparing for death is truly preparing for a deeper, more meaningful life. Because death does not wait until the end. It is here now, in every breath, every heartbeat. And only when we learn to fully live each moment can we die peacefully, and perhaps never be reborn again. At the core of all transformation, whether in life or in death, is the mind. If we don't understand the mind, don't discover how it works, then whether we live 100 years or endure countless rebirths, we remain blind travelers on an endless journey. In the deepest teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, especially those found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one truth is always emphasized. All phenomena, from the outer world to inner emotions, are manifestations of the mind. They have no inherent nature, no permanence, and are not as real as we assume. Think of the mind as a mirror. When the mirror is clean, it reflects everything clearly and naturally. But when it's clouded by dust, by illusions, attachments, anger, or fear, we no longer see reality. We only see distorted images, and we cling to them, thinking they're real. That clinging is the root of suffering, of rebirth, of being trapped in samsara. In the Bardo state after death, these mind projections become incredibly vivid. With no body to shield or slow perception, every thought and emotion is instantly projected like a vivid movie, full of colors, sounds, and feelings. If the mind is calm, clear, and practiced, we'll see that everything appearing, angels or demons, light or darkness, is just our own mind. And with that recognition, we can let go, neither chase nor flee, and thus be liberated. But if our mind has never been trained, never learned to observe or master itself, then the fierce visions of the Bardo will terrify us. We'll flee from frightening images, cling to pleasing illusions, and that alone will pull us back into the cycle of rebirth. So, understanding the mind is not an abstract philosophy. It is the ultimate survival skill, the skill to transcend even death. And it begins now, in every moment you live, in every reaction you have to life. When you learn to observe your mind, instead of being identified with it, you are step by step opening the gate.